Let's go now to our friend Beimnet Abebe from Galaxy Trading. As always, Beimnet, welcome to Galaxy Brains.
Thanks for having me.
What a day, what a week it's been. It's quite an exciting one. We're seeing a lot of movement. I was looking today at the Ethereum price in particular, which is up 120% since June, 260% from those April bottoms. That's 3.5x. And, still has not broken the all-time high, which, as you know, I know the audience will know I'm an avid Bitcoiner in general, between the two. And Bitcoin has made repeated all-time highs this year. But very notable move it's hard to ignore on ETH.
Yeah. No, I think it's all the market is focused on for the most part, or it's gotten a large portion of mind share within the crypto community. Rightfully so. The hottest thing in crypto right now are these ETH Treasury companies, SBET, BitMine. They're continuing to sell shares into the open market to purchase ETH. I think BitMine on Monday upsized their at the money offering by something on the order of like $20 billion.
Yeah.
And they still have a pretty healthy MNAV. And so, I think the market is kind of getting ahead of that flow in terms of the ETH price action. And, you've seen a lot of speculative longs come into the market. To give you an idea, like there are days when, ETH trading volume is like on par with Bitcoin, sometimes over.
Which is like 20 to 40 billion and stuff, right? Like
more, yeah. And to give you an idea, like I think Bitcoin OI across all venues on futures and perps is something on the order of like $80 billion. And ETH has ramped up to 60 billion.
So way above its market cap ratio.
Correct. So you're talking about a $20 billion difference in OI versus like a $1.9 trillion difference in market cap.
Yeah.
And you've seen funding rates become very elevated, particularly in ETH and a handful of, ETH-related alts.
So it's costly to be long right now because everyone is crowded.
It's crowded.
Yeah.
Right? That isn't to say that it can't get more crowded.
Right.
Right? Like just because something is overbought doesn't mean that it can't be, more overbought.
Hasn't like the S&P been overbought for like months at a time, and it's like very frequently.
Historically, it has paid to buy all-time highs in stocks.
Yeah. Right. So anyway, to your point, it can go higher.
Yeah.
And I think that certainly wasn't my point to make that like, has it gone too high? I think it's just hard to ignore. I mean, a 3.5x since April, that's 4 months. That's a story in any market. Obviously that was from an extremely low base.
Yeah.
But another data point is that the last 4 weeks, the ETH ETFs in the US
inflows,
have had more inflows than the Bitcoin ETFs.
Yep.
Which had never been true. They'd never the 5 weeks ago they were the largest inflows ever for the ETH ones, still just slightly at over almost 2 billion and still just slightly lower than Bitcoin. But the prior 4 weeks, including this week, we're recording on Wednesday, so we only have Monday and Tuesday's numbers. ETH flows are outpacing the Bitcoin inflows. I mean, in fact, 4 weeks ago, ETH flows were almost 2 billion, while Bitcoins were like 250 million.
Yeah.
So we're talking about like major discrepancies. And then during the pullback at the end of July, Bitcoin ones had significant outflows, and ETH still eked out an inflow. So like, there's a little bit of a rotation happening, no doubt, or has been happening.
And you can see that in the ETH BTC chart, right? Like
right.
It clearly bottomed and it's up a ton over the past 2 months.
Got down to like 0.017 or 0.018. I mean, I think I had a meme that was that TV show 1883. And I used ChatGPT.
Great show.
It was at like, I got a screenshot of when it was at 0.01883. And I used ChatGPT to make the main character's face on the movie poster Vitalik's face. But again, like that basically was the bottom, at least for now. I mean, everything can change.
I mean, ETH is having its institutional moment.
I mean, there's clearly a wall of money on these treasury companies and other speculators, as you said.
Yeah.
You've got to think some of that starts to relax. Not necessarily the treasury goes, but the speculators as it approaches and gets to. Right now, we don't have a block clock for Ethereum and never will. But it's right around 4,700. The all-time high from 2021 is like 4,867 or something like that. 4,867, I think, my recollection. So they're very close. A lot of people, you have to assume, we're closing that gap, buying the tariff liberation day dip on the assumption that it was just too low and surely it has to get back there. But as it gets there, right? I mean, it's been 4 years since ETH was in price discovery.
Yeah.
So no idea what happens then.
I think a breakout, like a confirmed, valid breakout.
Yeah, flipping that all-time high to support.
We'll see some pretty significant follow through.
Yeah.
I still think it's an under-owned asset, broadly speaking. Just if you think about market caps, like $400 to $500 billion versus like $2.5 trillion in BTC. So I think there's room to run. Before ETH BTC broke down, right? Like the ETH BTC relationship was pretty like constant in like the, maybe I'm thinking about it in like the 0.5 region.
0.5 to 0.7 for all of like 21.
Correct.
In that
and
region.
So, I think you could see a case for it going back up there potentially. But, I think to your point, there's a ton of digital asset treasury flow that hasn't come into the market yet.
Including from Bitcoin.
Yeah. But if you think about ETH just having a smaller float, right, and being a smaller market cap, like $1 billion into ETH will move price a ton more.
Right.
And moving away from ETH, there is a huge wealth effect from prices being at all-time highs essentially, and you're seeing that in the alt complex. And Solana's had a pretty decent run over the past couple of days.
200 I saw, which is. What is its all-time high? I'm recalling like 220s, but I think there was a wick. Yeah, there was a big
during
wick.
the Trump.
Like Trump inauguration.
Coin. Yeah. And so there's room to run there. And you still have plenty of catalysts to come, right? Solana ETF, more Solana treasury companies,
all the tokenization stuff. One that's interesting. I know Tom Lee's been talking a lot about this. One of his theses on ETH had been the Genius Act and stablecoins, and I think there's some truth to that, no doubt, and that most likely Wall Street will build on Ethereum and its ecosystems. But for example, we just saw Circle announce they're building their own L1 blockchain.
Yeah,
right. Like that's the stablecoin, the U.S. stablecoin issuer.
And Tether has Plasma.
Tether has,
and there's Tron is pretty active.
So
and
it does make me, not that there aren't other catalysts, but like that one, I'm really not quite sure. And by the way, Solana and Tron have significantly higher stablecoin velocity, and ETH does have a plurality of issuance, but it doesn't have a majority. And most of the ETH stables, I believe, are sitting in DeFi. Right? They're not actually. It's not really used there.
Yeah. So
it depends what you think stables will be used for. Will they be interbank transfers or medium of exchange, or will they be like settlement asset? And like ETH does well with stables as DeFi asset, but not so well for payments the way the others do. It's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah. I mean, the whole concept of value accrual back to ETH,
also big debate.
We can spend a lot of time on that. But I do want to acknowledge that just because a bank is involved in ETH and uses ETH doesn't mean that they're going to hold a ton of ETH on their balance sheet.
In fact, that goes to part of the value accrual question. Fees are so cheap, particularly on these L2s. The L2s, we were saying, I think Coinbase has only paid in all of Q2 base, their L2, Ethereum rollup, has only paid $443K in fees to the L1 to transact and confirm their blobs, as they're called, while extracting or charging its users on base nearly 15 million. So like that margin of like they're making 15, but they're only paying $500,000 to ETH. It's not quite the value accrual I think people hope. So I totally agree. I mean, ETH in some ways through its if you use these roll up L2s and you call that scaling, like it's scaled so well that like you barely need any at all to use the thing.
Yeah.
So it's a question.
Yeah. No, I mean, underlying all of the price action you've had over the past couple of weeks is just kind of a return of animal spirits, a little bit of a catch-up trade of not. I'm not going to go as far as to call it irrational exuberance, but there's definitely a lot of froth in the market, right? You have Fed policy that's really easy. Rates are rallying a bit further today. You've got fiscal that's incredibly supportive of
talking about that.
Of the economy. You have one of the hottest IPO markets I've seen in a while. You've had a number of very successful crypto IPOs.
We're getting close to Bitcoin all-time high here over my shoulder. Sorry, my senses. No, you're right. You're right.
And, you've seen crazy things like, these digital asset treasury companies trading at, very aggressive multiples. And, there's a ton of vaporware in crypto that has multi-billion-dollar market caps to it. And it's generally been well supported. And so, there's a lot of exuberance in this market. And, if you're an investor and you're really comfortable going pretty far out the risk curve, like crypto looks pretty good, especially like ETH
And
right now.
well supported by the government policy.
Correct.
Very almost no chance, at least in the next 3.5 years, that any material like negative government action happens, at least in terms of prices. There are some interesting areas that we've talked about BSA and things where the government's not really bending to what crypto wants. But in general, for stuff that's supportive for prices, seems pretty safe. I would just talk about Bitcoin a little bit here, and then let's finally talk about CPI basically, because you are a macro guy, and then there was some data, but it's not super consequential. That's why we're talking about this. A lot of Bitcoin company treasuries that have been announced and not yet deployed, as far as we can tell, as well.
Yeah.
So I think probably nominally a bigger wall of money, assuming it does get raised and does consummate, and these, in some cases, like SPACs do merge and all of that stuff, like probably a materially larger wall of money publicly stated to want to buy Bitcoin than ETH, but again, a much larger, more not so much liquid at the moment, but much larger asset than ETH. And so that's some of the discrepancy here between the two. But still, I mean, almost none of the announced net new ones, surely Sailor, surely Metaplanet, they're in the market, but like all of the 50 plus that we documented in Will Owens's report, almost none of them have actually deployed yet either.
Yeah.
And that's true across all of these digital asset treasury companies. Most of them are announced and not yet deployed, despite all of this price action. Most of them.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
So the question is, how much of that's like baked into the market? And realistically, you can't 100% bake that in until the flows come.
It's like we talked about with ETFs.
And so, I mean, it's, a market where the path of least resistance is probably still higher. My only concern is I do think that, when folks get back from Labor Day, they'll be like, okay, we just had this spectacular run in risk assets. Vol's pretty low, very, very low. Like Bitcoin vols, like at the money, are like 33.
That's so low.
VIX is on a 14 handle and change. Credit spreads are super tight. And, the interest rate curve is pricing, very aggressive cutting path. And so, if you see a reversion in that, that's probably not good for risk. And so I do think that, my timeline, which, I spoke about 2 weeks ago, is kind of like, right around the start of Labor Day, once folks get back,
you look for some stagnation or pullback. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. You said, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, you said, and rightly, you weren't you didn't say even Labor Day then, but you're right. It feels right. You basically said probably higher, but then probably some stagnation or even pullback at some point before the end of the year.
Yeah, and then you'll get kind of a resumption of the trend higher.
Yeah, who knows? End of year tends to be pretty positive.
October, November.
Yeah, I think over the last 10 years, October is Bitcoin's best performing month.
Yeah.
And I didn't go back to 14 years because there was a 500% rally in 2013 in October.
Yeah.
But yeah, since 2015 and 17, October, November, December have been very positive for Bitcoin almost every time. Only 1 or 2 years where it was negative.
Yeah, and October for stocks is one of the best months.
Yeah, so but it does feel, I agree. I mean, you're stretched here a bit. It makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, funding is elevated. People are gone super out the risk curve in terms of what they've invested in. But structurally, the bull market's in place.
Yeah,
and if you're a long-term investor.
And same thing with CPI, right? No big bad surprise with inflation at the moment.
No. I mean, you had. Well,
it's still elevated, though.
It's too early to tell on the inflation stuff.
Yeah.
You had a 0.3 print on the core CPI number.
Which is month over month.
Month over month.
Yeah.
Right. And the annual number came in at 2.7% core CPI.
So you're
still high, above target, and you've only like you haven't seen the full effect of the tariffs pass through into prices.
Or
I think
the big beautiful bill spending.
correct.
Yeah.
And like the wealth effect from all these assets going up in value.
Right.
And so, I really do think
Close Zillow, people. Get that Zillow closed, all right? Don't jinx us.
But yeah, so I do think there's a pathway for inflation to surprise, higher over the coming months. But again, if the Fed's committed to cutting because of various other factors, including, concern for the labor market and political pressure and, some other reasons, inflation can be very sticky and we can still be cutting. But yeah, I'm definitely
and risk assets can still perform well with inflation.
With inflation.
Yeah.
In fact, they do perform well.
Right,
They are the better inflationary
They
heads.
actually usually are inflation.
Yeah.
Or you see it different.
But yeah, I think I read an article yesterday saying that only like 20 some odd % of the tariffs had been passed through to consumers so far, and that it's likely to go up to somewhere in the ballpark of like 60 to 70% of the tariff pricing, hitting like consumers directly. And so you still got a long way for that. And most estimates are for that. The real impact of tariffs, you won't know for sure until like another 6 months forward.
Yeah.
So there's still time for inflation to surprise to the upside.
Yeah.
And, you still, even though there are some cracks in the labor market, it's still pretty tight. You're talking about a 4.2 unemployment rate.
Not bad. Historically quite good.
Really not bad.
Right.
So, we'll see. But it's definitely nice to see crypto trading well.
I mean, we are very, very close to Bitcoin all-time high as we record this on August 13th here in New York. Beimnet Abebe, my friend from Galaxy Trading, as always, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.